Hi everyone. We're going to start off the spring here with some work on the large bougainvillea that we worked on last year. You'll see it got through the winter pretty nicely. It kept all its ramification and it actually looks very good right now, so it's time to put it into a bonsai pot. Now at the end of the last video I teased by showing the intended bonsai pot, and we actually have that pot here now and we're ready to go with it. So let's get started on the repotting, but first, before we do that, if we look at the wire here, this wire is from last year. We've got a couple of smaller pieces that I just put on now to redirect some smaller branches, but this wire is starting to cut in here, so it has to come off. There are two ways to take wire off a bonsai. One is by cutting it off, the other is by unwinding. And in instances where unwinding works better, we like to use a little vice grips. You don't need a big one, a little one like this works just fine, but let's try cutting this off first because this guy's got a lot of thorns on it. And I'd much rather just get in with the cutter, take the wire off in pieces. Now the wire cutter has snub nose so it doesn't injure the tree. I'd never do this with an electrician's wire cutter. And so far we're doing pretty well with taking the wire off by cutting, so we're just going to keep at that. Now it may not be possible here where I have it doubled, so we may have to unwind it and just kind of carefully go on. Oops, I got the lower one there. Okay, so let's try gripping this one here. Screw this down a little, nice and tight. And then we bring this around. And we may be through the section that's doubled now, so now we can start cutting again and save ourselves some time and some trouble. Young bougainvilleas have extremely delicate roots, but a healthy older one should have a pretty solid root base on it. Now what we do is we try to rock it in the pot a little, and if it moves easily then we know the roots are not healthy and we need to be very careful. But if it pulls the entire soil mass with it, then we know it's really healthy. And if you look at this one, it is very healthy. But you can see the roots are already starting to flex on the near side to the camera here. So I got to be very careful how I get this guy out. You'll also notice I'm wearing leather gloves both to protect the bark and because of the thorns. So we'll just work a little bit on rocking this. I've already loosened the drainage screens, and now we'll try to get this thing out. Okay, we got it. And there we are. Now you'll notice we lost a few little fine roots pulling it out of the pot, but also it took two of the drainage screens with it, which was what was holding it in. Now what we'll do now is work on cleaning the roots. With a bougainvillea, we don't usually do that with a root hook or a cultivator. Instead what we do is we clean the roots with a water jet. And this is something that I arrived at by trial and error. It's also used on other species with delicate roots like hemp. We have a little problem. The tree's sitting too high on the bonsai pot because of this old taproot, so this has to get cut off. For that I use a power saw. Now, we're working near water, so I made sure this is plugged into a GFCI outlet. And what we'll do is we'll just go through this. We had to take a lot of roots off the bottom of this thing with the saw and with a large concave cutter. And because this thing's a bit top heavy and it's a big tree in a shallow pot, we've also wired it into the pot in 4 different places. At this point we're just backfilling in the soil, making sure all the roots get covered, and trying to get this thing nice and situated. And we're getting close to finishing up this repotting now. This whole area in here, I'm going to try to pack a little soil into. Eventually we'll address that, but we had to take a lot of roots off to get this guy into this shallow pot. Now I've already done a lot of working it down in with the chopstick, and at this point we're just kind of tamping it down with the fingers because I found that works pretty well once you get it worked down into the roots with the chopstick. As always, after we repot, we give the tree a nice watering. Now we've also fertilized this guy with Vigoro Bold Blooms, which is available at your local garden center, hardware store, big box home store, whatever you want to call it. And you'll notice this thing's taking the water pretty nicely. It's just starting to pool up a tiny bit in one corner. But because this is a large pot with a lot of volume, we got to give it a lot of water. Yeah, we had a little bit of stuff float off, but that's pretty normal. Let's let that drain. Yep, it's draining pretty nicely. Okay, give it a little more. We finally got this tree into its pot after a rather lengthy struggle. Had to do a lot of heavy work on the thick roots at the bottom. Had to do a lot of working with it to get it positioned right, got it wired in, got all the soil in. Now it's ensconced, it's happy, and with a little luck maybe we'll be able to show it at the club show in June. So now we'll do our slow 360 and show you what it looks like in its bonsai pot. We do have some big pruning scars here that were unavoidable, and someday we'll do further work on those. But at this point I think we've made some very good progress with this bonsai. So, thank you for watching, folks.